Welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, April the 26th, 2021. To get started, I would ask that everyone who is able to please stand for the playing of our national anthem. Thank you. We would also like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests among members of council this evening? No? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the set of minutes from the April 12th Committee of Adjustment and regular council meeting? Moved by Councillor Bonato, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? It's carried. Were there any questions submitted, Madam Clerk?
No, Your Worship, no questions this evening.
Oh, it looks like Councillor Wagner's on now. Let's give her a minute to make sure she's fully connected. Well, we can see you. It's a start. Okay, so we have one proclamation this evening for National Day of Mourning. And that proclamation reads as follows. Whereas April 28th is a day set aside to honor those workers across the country whose lives have been lost, those who have been injured or disabled on the job, or who suffer from occupational diseases. And whereas the town of Shelburne is committed to establishing and maintaining safe workplace conditions for our workers, and whereas the National Day of Mourning was officially recognized by the federal government in 1991 and originally launched by the Canadian Labour Congress in 1984, together on this day, we strive along with employers and unions across Canada to prevent workplace deaths, illnesses, and injuries. And whereas by recognizing the National Day of Mourning, we acknowledge the continuing need to work collectively with our unions and associations to eliminate workplace injury, illness, and death in the workplace. Therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, do hereby proclaim April 28th, 2021 as the National Day of Mourning in the town of Shelburne. All right, so we have a number of Community Excellence Award presentations to make tonight. Unfortunately, we're not able to do these in person, but we have 6 award recipients who I think are joining us remotely this evening. So the first award recipient was nominated by Councillor Wagner, and that is Shayla Bella Carter. Hey Bella, how you doing?
I'm excited. Thank you very much.
Good. So Bella has risen to support the Shelburne community by volunteering and participating in multiple events. She has developed initiatives to connect the community and develop communications to be inclusive of everyone. She is an exemplary person who continues to set the example of a community ambassador. So congratulations. Thank you very much for all that you have done to date, and please keep it up.
Thank you very much. I'm quite honored.
So Jennifer, in everybody's case, the certificate and medal will be delivered, I believe, to your homes at some point this week.
That's
A
correct.
medal and a certificate. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, the second recipient, also nominated by Councillor Wagner, is Tyrell Harris. Tyrell, yeah, there you are. How you doing? Tyrell is a young entrepreneur who has created and achieved what others work years to attain. His dedication and tenacity has proven invaluable as the successful founder of his very own clothing line by the name of Oofy, which you're proudly sporting, I see there tonight. So congratulations. Certainly make our community proud with all that you've accomplished, and I can only wait to see what lies ahead. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
The third recipient is a joint award, husband and wife team. This nomination was from Councillor Fegan, and the awards are to Richard and Alexander Magder. How you doing, guys? Is this your first Zoom meeting?
Yes, it is.
Hi.
Hi. So Richard and Alexander have donated and volunteered their time and resources to successfully operate fundraisers within the community and have supported community initiatives relating to community events. They are certainly worthy, deserving community ambassadors. So thanks again, guys, for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Kyle.
Hey.
You say thank you.
Thank you.
Next award was nominated by Deputy Mayor Anderson and is Yeha Soliman. How are you, sir?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good. We actually had an opportunity to meet just a few minutes ago outside of Town Hall. So he actually got his medal and certificate in a little earlier fashion than the rest. But in any event, you were certainly an active supporter of a number of community initiatives, and as many know, probably the leader of Muslims of Dufferin. While finding the time to volunteer and assist residents who are in need, you certainly exemplify the true meaning of community spirit. And for that, we thank you for your service.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mills. Thank you so much, Mr. Anderson. May God bless you all, and thank you for everyone who's participating right now in this beautiful occasion. May God bless you all, and thank you once again for everything. It's my honor to be with you guys, and yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you.
Wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you. The next award, also nominated by Deputy Mayor Anderson, is to Mike Mackley. Mike, see you on there. How are you, sir? Mike is a longstanding community member who has given his time and resources to support many of the town's community initiatives. Mike's service over the years has been impactful in many ways and has been warmly received by many community members who call him friend. So Mike, thank you very much for your service. Is Lorna going to turn your microphone on?
There you go.
That's better, isn't it? Thank you, Wade, and thank the council for voting me in. Thank you. For nomination.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Patricia Crawley, also nominated by Deputy Mayor Anderson. During the vaccine rollout locally, Patricia went above and beyond to assist seniors to ensure that they registered to receive their vaccine. Her dedication to our senior community members is a shining example of volunteerism within our community. So Patricia, thank you very much for your efforts.
Hi, thank you very much, and I nominate Steve because he did a lot of work for me. but I appreciate it. It's very kind of you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, Madam Clerk, I think the plan going forward, as we sort of have more and more nominations, we will hold events like this periodically until we're able to get back and meet in person. So we'll maybe look at doing another one of these late summer, early fall, something like that.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, to the award recipients tonight, again, thank you very much for all that you do for our community.
Thank you.
Please know that it is most
I can listen to
appreciated.
this council meeting, can't I?
Well, I guess you can.
Can't thank you enough. So I know that this award is just a small token, but please know that behind that certainly comes the gratitude of your entire community. So thanks again.
Yeah.
All right. So next up, we have a presentation from resident Mari McRae. Let Mari get signed on here. Too many people on my screen. There we go. Okay, there I see Mari. Just before Mari starts, well, it's certainly not a pecuniary interest. In the interest of full disclosure, I will mention that Mari is my sister-in-law. So I just say that to make it well known. There are certainly no favorites being played amongst family members, but on the flip side, the fact that somebody's related to a member of council shouldn't preclude them from joining in and making a presentation. So Mari, you want to talk to us about a stop sign installation on Gordon Street and First Avenue West, I understand.
I do. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen, if it will let me. Oh, I can't. Are we allowed to share a screen if we have a...
Try now.
Okay. Here we go. Perfect. Okay. I'm new to Zoom. I'm a Microsoft Teams user, so but it's not too bad. Okay, so yes, so I submitted the delegation regarding traffic and potential installation of a stop sign at the intersection of First Avenue West and Gordon Street. We've been a resident on First Ave West for 15 years. We have 4 children that have attended Highland Heights and Center Dufferin. And we've seen the traffic increase, significantly over the years, to the point now where it's an urgent matter that I think needs attention. As you know, Gordon Street, is one of the main arteries for bus and student traffic, both on foot and car. It is unique in the sense that it is wider, obviously up towards 4th Avenue, and it narrows as it comes down to Highway 89. The most narrow section is this section here between First Avenue West and 89, where barely a bus and a car can get through. This section has the first side of the sidewalk, and then it crosses over at the intersection and continues up to the schools. I'm just using this little map to kind of demonstrate kind of where the student traffic is coming from. We now have the Highland Village development. The students walk up along 89. They cross at the new crossing guard crosswalk here. They walk up along this very narrow sidewalk, and then they must cross across Gordon to intercept the sidewalk heading up to the schools. It is anybody that's familiar with the intersection, they know its visibility is very poor. There's a house right on the corner. Cars, come quite quickly up here, and it's basically just like a a speedway from 89 all the way up to 2nd, where we do have a 4-way stop. We have a stop sign on First Ave West, and we have a stop sign on the other side. But it is a bit of a racetrack here. This year, we were happy to see that we had a crossing guard there, and that has, clearly made the kids feel a little better about having to dodge across there in front of buses and speeding cars. However, we have noticed as a neighborhood, watching our kids try to get across there, there's been many close calls where the crossing guard, has entered the intersection and thinking that it's safe, but cars come up here so fast that he jumps back and then he yells at the kids to the other side to stop, don't, like, go back. We've seen that a few times. My daughter's had a couple close calls. She's quite scared of the intersection. So it is something that I feel needs to be addressed urgently. In the past, I've sent some emails into back in the previous council, but nothing didn't go anywhere. So this is why I decided now is it's time to do a proper delegation to the council. Once I submitted the delegation, I did receive a call from Jim Moss very quickly, actually, and he was very nice. He explained, that the town is aware of the traffic and issue there, and he did tell me that there was a traffic study done. And forgive me, Jim, if I get this number wrong, because I'm going by memory, but I think you said there was 2,200 cars a day traveling up and down Gordon, and that was with the with lesser traffic with online school for the high school. So if everything was normal, if everybody was back in school and things were normal, I would think that would be considerably higher. Now, Jim did mention that there have been meetings already or slated for discussing the stop sign in regards to the this new development that's going in here at the end of First and 2nd in between here, and their responsibility for either widening this narrow section or changing the intersection in some way. I'm not exactly sure what Jim said about that. However, I didn't understand the correlation between waiting for instruction from this developer, the correlation between the responsibility of what's been put on this developer when this traffic issue has been an issue for 15, 20 years, and this developer hasn't even broken ground yet. So I don't see where the onus of responsibility lies on this developer for keeping the kids that are currently using this intersection every day safe. In fact, all I see is this kind of exasperating the issue because the traffic is only going to increase. So basically I'm just hoping that council can have a discussion about this and, maybe kind of discuss as to why it's being held off or why it's, why it's waiting in the queue for this developer to make decisions or whatnot. I just don't understand the relationship between that. So basically that's it. Hopefully this can stir a little bit of conversation and hopefully some good news for all of us that have children that are crossing there every day. Okay.
Great, thank you. Just hang on the line there for a minute if you don't mind,
yep.
In case there are any questions.
Sure.
Councilor Donato.
I remember the former discussion on First Avenue, and I remember we did discuss it, and the developer, we talked to him quite a bit, and he is part of that discussion was the widening of Gordon Street, and I believe he was attempting to buy that property where that street actually narrows at first. And part of that discussion, when he brings his street out from the subdivision to First Avenue, was when the stop sign was thought to go in at that point in time. But I understand where you're coming from, Murray. I know that street awful well. High school days going down it. I agree with you. There is a lot of traffic going up there, and I remember in the former discussion, and I believe Deputy Mayor Anderson may be on council along with our mayor at that point in time, and maybe Steve will remember as well as I do. But the stop sign was something we did want in there, and I still think we want it in there. Whether I don't agree with waiting for the developer to do it. I think we can go in now.
Mhm.
And I knew back in that discussion, I was pushing for it at that time there because of the bus going up there, the fact that it is a narrow street, the fact that there are kids going up there, and I don't even think we had calculated in the Highland Village kids going up there. We were just thinking of the time of the subdivision that was going to be developed on the other side of the railway track.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I'm going to put a motion for it after discussion for a stop sign to go in there. So just to let you know.
Wonderful, thank you. I do think that it is a good time right now to do it with the kids being online at school and not using it right now. It would give the neighborhood and people who travel it regularly an opportunity to become familiar with the new stop sign being there. So, you know, it will become hopefully old habit by the time the kids do go back. And that will help too with potentially anybody running the stop sign by not realizing it's there. I would think that in situations like that, do you put kind of the warning sign ahead of time that there's a new stop sign ahead? I think I've seen the town do that as well. So something right off of Highway 89 would be very helpful there.
I think we put it in both places.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I see Councillor Buffett and Councillor Fegan and Denise.
Okay, do you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the last time we had a meeting with the original developer, it was my understanding that we had agreed to have them do two things. Number one was to put the stop signs in before any construction started, and number two, to also deal with the truck traffic from, you know, bringing loads of gravel and so forth. So we have that application coming before us tonight for final approval before they start doing all the servicing work. So can we not just make sure that we have that wording inside of that recommendation that we have in the report tonight?
Okay. Councillor Fegan.
Realistically, Councillor Buffett and Councillor Bernardo both pretty much hit the points that I was going to bring up. We had a discussion on this road already, did we not? Talking about adding stop signs in here already?
Yeah, we had that discussion, and I know that we did. I agree with Linda. That was part of the discussion, but I wasn't sure if he was going to put the stop sign in before or when he was widening out the road. I can't remember the exact wording on that.
Okay. If I could just add something to that, I've been in discussions with that particular developer because he's still trying to. I'm working with the person who owns the property there at the corner, and we're still trying to come up with some kind of an agreement. And if the agreement goes forward, then there will be an opportunity to take that strip of land off that property. It's still in discussions right now.
So sorry. So even if it eventually does become widened, it still would be an advantage to have the stop sign in immediately.
Yeah. Even if we had temporary ones for now.
Right. Thank you.
We can move them.
Please.
Sorry, with respect to not just the timing of a stop sign, we just wanted to note, and I know that Jim had made this point, that we would have to monitor and be sure that we do not have a backlog of cars coming off 89 in terms of any volume. And it's also been our understanding that while we do have less people busing in when school was on, we have a significant number of parents who are now driving their children to school. which we believe is also contributing to the volume count. So we just wanted to make you aware of that. As a stop sign is installed on some of the things we'll have to monitor as well.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Because I know there's a stop sign on James Street off 89, which leads to the Foodland Giant Tiger currently. And you have to stop there. And there are quite a bit of traffic, turning in that particular road. I'm just sort of wondering, and I know we have to monitor it, but I'm kind of wondering the difference between that particular road maybe in Gordon Street, other than the fact that Gordon's a little narrower. I mean, in the way of traffic. I'm just trying to picture it in my head because I'm assuming that traffic is pretty close to the same in my mind in the way of turning up those two streets.
I'm going to ask Jim to address it more technically, but if you notice when the height of the volume is and it peaks during school times, so if you can imagine people and a volume of traffic coming off of 89, all trying to get through a very short distance, not hitting a stop sign, that's a bad word, stopping at a stop sign, and then the backlog coming off 89, whether they're trying to make a left or right as they proceed up Gordon. And again, that's even more congested when you're mixing buses and other vehicles into the mix. Jim, I'll let you deal with the more technical stuff that we identified.
Sure. Yes, through your worship. The traffic volume as of our last count, so at the end of November, 1st of December of last year, the volume was 2,182 vehicles per day, which is a fair amount. This intersection, as the resident mentioned, there has been identified in the traffic study that formerly Stonebridge Homes, now Shelburne Towns, did do at the time, and it was identified that the sight lines were wanting. You don't have that 65 meters sight line at 50 kilometers an hour, which is the speed limit. So the developer is responsible, as through Steve Weaver and the agreements that GSP is going to put together, that they have to do improvements to that intersection, or the other suggestion, as by the traffic study, was to install the four-way stop sign. So this development has been on hold for quite a while. It's been sitting, and the new owners of the property are wanting to proceed immediately. So there will be improvements to First Avenue, as well as that intersection, and failing that, the stop sign. But
okay, thanks, Jim. Two questions, Jim. First is, and I understand that the developer, will be looking at intersection improvements, but is there anything that precludes us from installing stop signs now until those improvements are done?
no, the town does have its own stop sign installation policy that we put in place back in 2018. And just as a quick rudimentary once over, I went through that criteria, and it does meet a fair amount of that criteria, but I haven't looked at it in full view of the entire policy.
Okay, and then secondly, given its proximity to Highway 89, is that a location that would require MTO approval, or that's fully within our jurisdiction?
Through your worship, no, it would be fully within council's jurisdiction.
Denise, sorry, did I see your hand again?
I'm just confirming, but Councillor Fegan had asked for staff to follow up with MTO regarding our expectation of having our entire community at 40 kilometers. I believe this road is 50, so if council wished, this is certainly within our jurisdiction to immediately reduce the speed on that street to 40.
So, your worship, if I can make a motion, as I said earlier, can I motion that we put stop signs on that street, on that corner in particular, and lower the speed limit to 40 kilometers on the whole street?
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Fegan? All right. Jennifer, are you clear on the motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any discussion or debate on that? Okay, question, all in favor? That's carried. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, council inquiries. I have a couple, but I'll open the floor to everybody else first. Anybody have any inquiries?
Yeah, I do.
Councilor Donato?
I want to ask Jim, if possible, on the sidewalks, are we cleaning any of them? Because I know in my area, nothing is cleaned. It's all got sand still from winter time.
Through your worship, yes, staff has been out with the sidewalk sweeper in different areas. I'd have to check in with Public Works. I know street sweeping is still ongoing, both on the streets and the sidewalks. So I just have to see when they're planned to be up in that neck of the woods up in your neighborhood. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Wagner?
Hi, thank you very much. Yeah, just inquiring when road painting is going to start. I know that the street sweepers have been out. Granted, it's been on and off with the weather and whatnot, but I would hope that they're almost done cleaning up the town. And then, yeah, just wondering when we can start to see that road painting happening again.
Yes, through your worship. They have been in, they've done what they call center of the road clean out, where they've swept to the edges. In the next couple of weeks, they will be doing another pass to clean everything right up. So hopefully within the next few weeks, we'll have the street sweeping done. We've already ordered the paint and I believe we've received it. So once that's out of the way, we'll be ready to go for the crew to go out and start painting all the crosswalks, stop bars, all that sort of stuff. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Denise, I was just wondering if we could have a quick update on the Jack Downing Park redevelopment. You know, we budgeted that this year and talked about incorporating some commemoration for COVID-19.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. Certainly, there actually will be a staff report on the May 10th agenda, providing council with an update on the project timelines. I'll share now that the budget that was assigned of $20,000 in 2021 was a modest budget. There was also some assumptions that we might be able to get all of the materials donated, as well as projects in consultation with and partnership with volunteers. COVID has presented us with new challenges, so the budget will come back with a request to increase it with some general concept plans and some features for council's consideration on May the 10th.
Okay.
With the, I should just say, with the expectation that the project would still be completed for hopefully reopening in mid to late September 2021.
Okay. And presumably, I think we had talked about this at budget time too, but we can still look at, you know, community sponsorship options, I think, as well to help fund it.
Certainly.
Okay. And then secondly, it was more just sort of a public service announcement, a reminder to the community. As I'm sure most people know at this point, the province, through its latest emergency declaration, has instituted some additional regulations with respect to parks. There was a bit of a reversal on that shortly after the first announcement, but as it stands right now, just so everybody's clear, our parks do remain open. What is available for use are park benches, the outdoor playground and play structures, and the parks are certainly available to walk, run through, exercise in. Within the park, however, there are certain elements that are mandated to remain closed, and those include, for our purposes at least, the skateboard equipment in park, the basketball courts and pads, tennis and pickleball courts, the pavilions, as well as the sports fields, so soccer, baseball, and cricket. I know our public works employees have been having a challenge trying to keep things roped off and taped off, and some residents are taking it upon themselves to tear down those ropes and tapes, you know, just as quickly as we can get them up, which is unfortunate. So I, you know, would ask for the community's cooperation These are not local bylaws, local restrictions. These are provincial restrictions that we are required to enforce. I think in the case of Greenwood, we have been able to capture some footage of a certain individual removing some of these barriers, and that's certainly been provided to the OPP. But you're certainly not helping anybody by doing that. So, you know, let's just try to work together on this. Let's make use of the parks to the extent we can, and certainly respect the regulations that are in place that we're all, you know, we're required to follow at this point. Any final inquiries? Yeah, Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. I'm not sure whether this should be brought up by way of a motion later on in the agenda, but the mayor will, I'm sure, will add his comments to this. One of the things that we agreed to do at the Peace Services Board when it came to the departure of the Shelburne Police was to find a way to honor their history and their legacy. And we had asked the chief to save some, whether it was badges or uniforms. They took a picture together, and these are things that we wanted to preserve and have, in essence, in display in Town Hall. And so I think it was at our last meeting, Mayor Mills, where we discussed that and figured that it would probably be best that that council itself take the lead in possibly organizing or maybe even sourcing how we could maybe get a display case, something similar to, for example, if you go to the Museum of Dufferin, right? And you see in their major display cases, whatever features that they have in there that they want to highlight. What we are imagining is something similar in Town Hall, which is a permanent fixture. I would assume rather, or it could be removed, but I'm assuming permanent, where we would have something in a display case that has the picture of all of them, whether it was an old uniform, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just putting that up there for discussion. It may have to come by way of a motion, but I figured I'd bring it up right now.
So I guess just a question to staff, do you require a formal motion from council to kind of start looking into that? Most of the artifacts, I guess, for lack of a better term, we have on hand. There were two #1 dress uniforms that were retained. The group photo that the deputy mayor referenced, and some other items as well. So I think we have the material. It's really just a matter of, I guess, sourcing the display case and determining where that ultimately will be housed within Town Hall. Denise?
Through the mayor. So if it's something that needs to be purchased and acquired based on specifications, that would usually need to go through our purchasing policy, and if it's customized and built. So if you gave us a list of what artifacts needed to be included, then the dimensions could be estimated and a quote for that product could be requested for production as well as installation at a dedicated space within, I guess, the first floor of Town Hall.
So maybe we could move forward with I mean, unless I'm hearing otherwise, we could do a motion later on, or whether we could do it, well, presumably we can't do it now, but certainly later on, we could maybe bring a motion if necessary.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Great. Okay. Last call for inquiries. All right. Okay, so the first report tonight is from S. Burnett and Associates regarding the water and sewage project update. So Steve, welcome. How you doing?
Excellent.
Good. Some good news for us.
Always good news. That's I think what Walter says, right?
Yeah. You bring good news?
Yeah, I don't.
That's
right. I never get to bring the good news. I only bring the reality news. So,
but it always costs money when you're on here. But that's
yes.
not a bad thing. So, anyways, take it away.
So I don't know, Jennifer. I'm not sure if it's easiest for me to share my screen for the presentation, or whether you wanted to share the presentation portion. I think it was an appendix to my report.
I have it in PDF, not in PowerPoint. So if you want.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's, I just, for something for council to be able to see, unless council feels it's easier to have the
There you
full
go.
screen open and we can just talk through it. So yeah, if we go to the next page, Jennifer, please. So ultimately, we have brought this presentation forth to council really as an update on the existing water and wastewater projects. I think council is well aware there have been several EAs under work, and there's been interrelated projects with that, but we did want to bring that forward, especially based on the most recent sewage allocation report that had come forward approximately a month ago. So right now there are 3 environmental assessments ongoing within the town of Shelburne. The first is a water supply Schedule B Class EA, and that is interrelated with ongoing works at Production Well 1, Production Well 3, and Production Well 7 and 8. Although not part of the Class EA, there is also an elevated water tower project that is ongoing for increased storage, both for fire protection as well as emergency and peak demands. I think the one that council's probably very well aware of is there is also the EA, which is a Schedule C EA, ongoing for the water pollution control plant or the sewage treatment plant. And this past January, there was also a wastewater master servicing plan that was initiated, and that is to really look at how each section of town can be serviced. So this is more the collection system, the distribution system, etc. There will also be a stormwater master servicing plan done next year. It is budgeted for 2022. Is not ongoing, has not started yet, but just has been budgeted by staff and council for next year. If we move to the next page, just a bit of an update for council on PW1 or well 1. As a reminder to council, this was the well that was taken offline in 2020 due to low production rate. It had dwindled down to about 5 liters a second, and then ultimately I think it was down to about 1 liter a second when Aqua made the decision to take that well offline. Normally that well was originally at 14 liters a second, so quite a good production well for the town of Shelburne. Rehabilitation work completed earlier this year did bring that well from a quantity perspective back up to approximately that 14 liters a second. However, Aqua did run into some air entrainment issues, and this is really bubbles trapped in the water, which we have now figured out is part of the way that well was designed. And we're just now looking at a way to treat those bubbles because they kind of act like turbidity. And so even though the water's clean, even though the water is potable, it sets off the turbidity alarms and some of the equipment. So recently, as part of some operations work, it was agreed to install some new turbidity equipment, some screening, as well as some air release valves to try and eliminate that issue. So ultimately with this one, the plan is to have well 1 back online by about midsummer of 2021. Alternatively, and this is something I'd brought forward to council before, if the rehabilitation works cannot work and we cannot deal with this air entrainment issue, then alternatively a new well would potentially be required here, but ultimately prognosis is pretty good right now, and we're hopeful this last piece will work to bring this back online this summer. Moving to the next slide and a bit of an update for well 3. Remind council, this was a well that we were also completing rehabilitation work on, and there was some bubbling and backflow observed in Walters Creek, which is just adjacent to the well 3 pump house. This led to the concern that this well may be referred to as Goody, and just to explain, that's groundwater under the direct influence of surface water. So any concerns with that well potentially having surface water could lead to contamination, could lead to other issues that way. So that well project or that rehabilitation was wrapped up, and we did proceed forward based on council approval to go through a GUDI analysis or a GUDI study. The results of that study was submitted to the Ministry of the Environment, or MECP, on March 3rd. The ministry did get back to us and through staff and through SBA, and agree with the designation of GUDI with adequate filtration, in situ adequate filtration. And essentially what that means is if it's groundwater, you need 2 log removal of irises. So it's the lowest treatment level, which a lot of the wells in Shelburne are, and that's how well 3 was originally considered. We fall into the second category, which was kind of a best case scenario, which is it is GUDI, but the natural soil treats the water as it travels through it. So you don't need to have full filtration, but we do need to add a 4 log removal of iris, which requires UV disinfection. And then the third, which it did not fall into, but would have been the worst case scenario, would have been full GUDI, which it would have required a full chemically assisted or equivalent treatment system, which could have been in the millions beyond what it already is. So we did fall into the second category. And if we move to the next slide, Jennifer, I think it continues. So the council is aware one of the downsides was that the arsenic design, which is what we were doing this assessment work in the first place for, was put on hold while this determination was happening. We were able to start that design back up again once it was determined that we were in the middle category with respect to GUDI status. And we are at a point right now where the MECP has agreed and actually issued a permit or approval for our recommended upgrades to well 3. And we are currently in the process of wrapping up that design, just completing some structural work with the expanded building footprint, and should be out to tender late spring to early summer for this project. Just so council is aware, the rehabilitation work did work well. It brought this well back to 15 liters a second for pumping and a sustainability of 13 liters a second, which it had degraded over the years down to about 10.3. So it was a very positive outcome. The downside, times have moved forward. We've lost some years as this has moved forward from the original project scope. The addition of the UV and a building footprint expansion that's now about double what we originally anticipated has now brought this project into just under the $3 million range. We did recently apply under ISIP or Green Stream funding for this well at a $2.7 million ask. And as a reminder to council, that funding was turned down. We are hopeful that new streams come forward, but we may not be able to apply or have them announced prior to having to go out to a proposal call for this. Moving to the next screen, Pw7 and Pw8. So these are the supply wells that are located within Melanchthon Township. These have been a large producing well supply, and right now alternate between well 7 and well 8. Work was completed there, both modeling wise and some testing to try and actually run these wells together. The advantage of running the wells together is twofold. One is we can double the amount of supply that would come from 7 and 8 because we ultimately would get both flows at the same time. Also, what happens is because of the naturally occurring arsenic levels at well 5-6, as council probably recalls, this water supply is actually blended with the arsenic at 5 and 6. So 5 and 6 is capped at about 75% of what it can actually pump if the flows were available. So Moving forward with this has two advantages. One is doubling the flow from 7-8. Two would be that we could actually go back to 100% flow from 5-6 and still be able to keep the naturally occurring arsenic below the limits. So this did require upgrades and replacement of 2 new pumps and VFDs, controllers, etc. In this. Council had approved this, I think, last fall, and just to update council, that work has been completed, and we do plan to move into that testing mid-May for testing 7 and 8 concurrently. One of the things that will happen with this is that a source water protection plan will need to be redone along with the modeling and the consultation with Grand River Conservation Authority and Nottawasaga, which we have been in consultation with already. So while we plan to move forward and have this works done in the next few months, and as we say into summer of 2021, the actual permit and ability to run these wells together will most likely not occur until 2022. It is about an 8-month to 12-month time frame. If we could go to the next slide. This is more or less just to give council a bit of an insight into the urgency of some of this water supply work. I know we've had a lot of discussions about issues maybe with sewage capacity and allocation. But just to bring this into context, the bottom line across the screen is our average day demand. So that's based on today, 2021, through to the 20-year projection of 2041. The next line up is the current water supply that we have today. So this is with well 1 offline, well 3 offline, and well 7, 8 operating in its current capacity. You can see there that that's around 4,800 cubic meters a day. While it is greater than the average day demand, it's actually lower than our max day demand. So council will probably recall last summer, there was a period where we had to establish a low water use or the bylaw to limit water use during the summer. This is the reason that if we're not able to meet the maximum day flows, there would be time periods during the summer where flow demand or requirements will actually be higher than what's required. The good news is that the purple line across the top that jumps to about 7,800 is the line where we end up once PW1, 3, and 7 and 8 can come online. So the positive to that is by working through these programs, by working as we have been, we can actually put ourselves in a situation where we can meet the maximum day demand out to almost 20 years. It's around between 16 and 17 years out. So the advantage of that is we could push off looking for new water supply or another well or anything of that nature, probably out 15 years from now once this comes together. So moving to the next slide, the next steps in wrapping up the water supply EA is to complete that pumping test as indicated, move forward with the approved project at well 3 for UV and arsenic treatment, deal with the air entrainment issue at well 1, and then run a 72-hour pumping test to confirm that work. As I indicated, there is updated source water protection modeling, and each of those other items, updates with the GRCA modeling, etc., are all interrelated with that. And then ultimately we would apply for that updated permit to take water, which will trigger an interbasin transfer just because the water supply is in the Grand River and we're pulling it into the Nottawasaga, which is very similar to how that work happened with 7 and 8, which is why we do expect it will be a year from now before we will actually be able to take advantage of that work. But ultimately, our plan is to finalize the EA and submit a notice of completion, most likely in late fall, early winter of 2021 for this project. Moving to the next slide, As I indicated, although not part of the water EA, there is a new water tower that has been proposed. As a reminder to council, this EA for this work was actually completed in 2012, and the EA is valid for 10 years. So part of the reason that this project was moving forward to make sure that that did not have to be repeated. Public notices did go out just because of the length of time that has gone by since this. So we do plan to issue an RFP for this work in May. MECP has reviewed and provided approval for this work with the goal of construction starting in August, September of 2021. Just so council is aware, this is approximately a 12-month to 14-month build. So it will take through to approximately late summer of 2022 before this new tower would be commissioned and come on. I guess moving to the next slide, and this is one that we have talked about quite a bit, but just to bring council up to date again as to where the water pollution control plant EA is currently sitting. Second PIC was completed approximately a year ago, June 2020. Simulated capacity study was approved by MECP, and that's essentially the approval to have the limits or effluent limits for discharging to the creek or to ultimately the receiver. Several treatment technologies were considered and narrowed down to 3, being MBR, SBR, and extended aeration, which the current plant is. Pilot testing is currently underway to look at the preferred or suggested preferred MBR technology. In fact, we had the kickoff meeting today with staff and the supplier of that unit. A phase construction was also considered and has been looked at as far as trying to defer some of the capital costs. As a reminder to council, the current capital costs for the entire upgrade were estimated at approximately 26 million for the membrane technology and up to 34 million for the extended air technology. The phased approach, if utilized, has a range of approximately 19 million for phase 1 with MBR through to 28 million phase 1 with extended aeration. One of the things that we have also looked at is there were a few items, if council recalls, where there were some aqua housekeeping items. There were also some items that it would be easier to fix now versus down the road. So some of those, specifically one of the main ones being the storm ponds that have been utilized as sewage ponds up front. The low range of the 19 would maintain those ponds. Now we would be looking at potentially minimizing the use of those ponds to 1 or 2 days, or alternatively having the ponds take treated effluent after it's already gone through the plant. But that was one thing that had close to a $4 to $7 million costing in the original numbers. So I just wanted to make sure council was aware of that when they see the $19 million number. So right now, MECP has signed off on the simulated capacity study, so we can move into the next stage from their perspective. Staff have also been working with NVCA on developing a Boyne River adaptive monitoring and stewardship plan. So NVCA is also on board with the recommendations of the EA through that. And ultimately at this point, as noted in the allocation study that was presented, or sorry, the allocation report that was presented previously, there is an urgent need of advancing the water pollution control plant upgrades in order to provide sufficient allocation for future development, as well as the build out of Shelburne to the year 2041. And so we are recommending allocating engineering and design budget to proceed with that stage. At this point, I think maybe if we go to the next slide. So the next steps for this EA would be to complete that pilot study so that council is aware it's approximately a 10-week scenario. And I think I have indicated this to council before that it's really to confirm the technology. So the EA could be wrapped up without this study or with this study, but right now we're recommending to wrap it up with the pilot information because it has just started and would be completed within the next 2.5 to 3 months. Host a final PIC, finalize the EA report, and file the notice of completion with the ministry on this EA project, which if we waited for the pilot study information would be projected to be about midsummer to early summer. Moving forward to the next slide. As I indicated, there is also a master servicing plan EA, which started January 2021. The purpose of this EA, as I said, is really to look at the water distribution model, the wastewater collection system. So while the other EAs look at either the source or the treatment at either end, as council can appreciate, there are also the need to run pipes from different sections. You could look at the south end or look at the west end, and how are you transferring either water or sewage from or to those locations. Some will require upgrades to some of our existing infrastructure. So ultimately this EA will determine that piece of it. Can you still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, it just told me my lovely rural internet was maybe a little bit unstable. So I guess ultimately I won't necessarily go through every point of the summary report. I think the presentation kind of alludes to each one. I think the big thing here is that there has definitely been the need and urgency push forward on both the water and wastewater side in order to handle the current pressures of growth for the town of Shelburne. On the positive, the water is really being resolved, or hopefully being resolved, for the next 16 to 17 years through the initiatives that have already been approved by council for moving forward. At this point, we are recommending utilizing sewage reserves to set aside similar move forward with design work on the sewage treatment plant recommended alternative. And I guess I would turn it over to council for any questions at this point.
Okay. Certainly an expensive report, but I mean, it's good to go through that, and I really do appreciate it, because I mean, although there are some big ticket items there, when you look at it sort of big picture, I mean, these are the sorts of investments that are going to satisfy our water supply and wastewater needs essentially for the next 20 years. And that's certainly the way that I'm going to look at that. And I think that the faster we move on this, the better. Councillor Bernardo.
Steve, you certainly don't disappoint us. You always come back with an excellent report. Just costly. I got a question on the stewardship with the MVCA. We're picking up the cost for that, I gather.
Actually, the NVCA is looking at a partnership for that, where they would actually be picking up some of the costs. The town will be covering some of the water quality assessment work, but it actually is a partnership and not fully on the town's ticket, I would say, is the best answer to that, Walter.
Well, and the reason I asked that question is because when we first started out on this EA with the Conservation Authority, we had discussed that knowing that it was coming forward and assisting with the new expansion on the sewage treatment plant, that some of those costs would be passed on to the developers, not on to us, because it's because of the development in the town So is that still the plan? And I guess staff maybe can answer that better than you can, Steve, but that's why I asked if there are costs involved. I guess Denise, maybe you can, do we pass these, can we get the developers to carry the costs as part of their development charges for any of the stewardship costs instead of the town carrying those costs?
I'm going to ask if, sorry, not to deflect it, but there is inclusion of some DCs with respect to some of the development. We'd have to go back and look at specifically what's growth related and see what percentage of that is attributed back. I'm not sure if that would be more a Steve Weaver or if Carrie wants to stick handle that one on the actual percentage. But yes, it is DC eligible.
Up to 90%? Would that be fair? Carrie?
I would have to go back into the actual DC report just to specifically see what we've put in there for what is eligible with respect to that. I know that these numbers were not totally known, but we, as Steve mentioned, we did assume that our costs were going to be going up, and that we did account for that in the DC study.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, I hate to see for it all to sit on all the taxpayers when it's really growth related, the reason for the stewardship being brought on to us. And my second question, the 2 million is currently in our capital budget, I gather, for the expansion plans to go ahead. That's what you're asking for tonight, am I correct? That you can go ahead and start the expansion plan. So that's currently in our capital budget, right?
Yes.
Yes, the 2 million is sitting in reserves.
Okay.
Ready to be utilized for that project.
So the sooner we get started, the sooner we're going to have an expansion going on the sewage treatment plant.
Yeah, and just to clarify, if you go to Steve's report, the financial section was completed by staff, that we outlined what we actually have in reserves to date. Of the 2 million would be expended to ensure that the design and the engineering would move forward, with the expectation that would take a year, and then assuming that once that's completed, it would be 2 years for construction. Yeah. And as Steve mentioned, we have to still qualify and quantify what solution would be recommended to council and approved, and that ranges from 26 to 33 million.
Yeah, and I do apologize. I probably, although I skipped over not to repeat things, I probably should have brought those numbers up and just highlighted them, that currently there's 3.45 in that reserve, with approximately a transfer anticipated of 723,000 and change. So ultimately, that would still leave a 4 million. I guess it was budgeted at 4 million, and we are requesting to move forward with this, I think.
So, yeah, okay, I'm looking at the numbers here, the financial impact on your thing. You're right. By the end of it, we'll have 4 million, but you're taking 2 million out of it at this point in time to go ahead and start. So that is the start of the plans for the actual expansion of the sewage treatment plant, that 2 million. Correct, Steve?
Yeah, so that is, we've utilized the same technique that any other capital would, and that would cover the entire design, pending any headaches or hiccups, to implement that first phase and get you at a point of readiness where it could be tendered for a move forward with construction.
Okay.
Carrie?
If I may, and those reserves that we have set aside ourselves are built up through our water and sewer rates. And once the construction, the design phase is done and the actual construction commences, we can pull from DCs to replenish our own reserves back again.
Okay. So Steve, in sort of a perfect world, and I mean, obviously we won't hold you to this, but assuming we approve this tonight to get started with engineering, how quickly could construction actually commence?
We are, through you, your worship, we are, as I've said over and over again, it's about a year design timeframe, and that's I think being fair to MECP and other approval folks that need to approve the design. So we've set a minimum of a year. So if the EA wraps up midsummer, this should have the design complete by mid to late summer next year, pending any hiccups. So worst case scenario, it's not always great heading into fall for construction. So worst case scenario, you would start the next spring with construction. But if we were able to move forward in a timely fashion, we're probably about a year and change out from start of construction.
All right. Any other questions? No. Okay. So we have a motion that reads, be it resolved, the council receives report SBA 2021-02 regarding water and sewage projects update, and that up to $2 million be approved to be funded from the wastewater reserve for the design portion of the water pollution control plant upgrades, and that the design work be commenced by the municipal engineer upon completion of the water pollution control plant EA study. I get a mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Any discussion on that? All in favor? It's carried. Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, next report is from our planner regarding the pre-servicing agreement for draft plan of subdivision and draft plan of condominium for the Marimel Homes development, Shelburne Towns. Steve, how are you?
Good. Good evening, everyone. And I just put a few quick slides together because there wasn't a map included in my report, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity just to recap a bit of this development, as it's been a little while since you've seen it. So the purpose of the report tonight is for the pre-servicing agreement, and this means that the owner, Sconce Developments, represented here tonight by Rudy and from Marimel Homes, as well as Heather Simpson from RJ Burnside, who can assist with answering any questions. And so the development has moved forward to a level of design detail through the engineering design that staff are now comfortable with recommending a pre-servicing agreement. So the subject property is located at the west end of 1st and 2nd Avenue. And there are two phases to the development of this property. So it's the phase that's the subject of my report tonight is called Phase 1A, which is 33 townhouse units, basically between 1st and 2nd Ave along the west boundary of the property. The second phase, or Phase 1B, is the frontage out on Main and Gordon Street. And that is zoned for some additional residential development, but further planning approvals in the form of a further plan of condominium, site plan, or similar approval will be required for the development of that part. And at this point, we don't know all of the exact details of that part of the site. So this is the draft plan of subdivision that was approved in 2019. There are 9 blocks that would be created by that subdivision. Blocks 1 to 6 are for the 33 street townhouse units. So this is oriented so that north is kind of in this direction. This is the top end of the property, north of 2nd Ave, where there would be some townhomes backing towards the north. And then the balance of the townhomes would be in these blocks here, backing on the former rail corridor to the west. Block 7 is outlined in red here. That's a future development block, as I mentioned, for the land down at Main and Gordon. So there'll be further planning approvals required for what's proposed there, which we don't have the details of yet. There is a small block for a conveyance for the land to the east of the site, where we have an existing home that has some encroachment on the property. So the purpose of that conveyance is to resolve that encroachment. That may not be necessary in the end. As I understand, the owner's looking at potential integration of that existing residential property with Block 7, but that's subject to further review. And then finally, Block 9 is one kind of irregular shaped block with a stormwater facility that will go at the south end of it, the private common element condominium road, which will go along the long narrow part in the middle with a cul-de-sac at the north end. And then it also includes some parking for visitor parking. So you can see on the draft plan of condominium that was approved with the subdivision, the details of that common element block. So these are all the pieces of the development that will be shared in ownership amongst all the townhouse units in the development. So the stormwater facility in the area outlined in blue, the visitor parking areas in the 2 areas outlined in red, the common sidewalk along the west side of the street, and then the common private roadway between 1st and 2nd Avenue and up to a cul-de-sac at the north end. One of the key aspects that we have addressed in the pre-servicing agreement is the construction access, and for many of the reasons that were discussed tonight, which relate to some of the concerns about traffic on Gordon Street and the condition of Gordon and 1st Ave at that intersection. So as much as possible, the agreement directs construction access of certainly heavier and larger vehicles from the west side of Gordon Street. So there will be a temporary road created in this location, basically across from the existing rear lane on the east side of Gordon Street, so that traffic can come into the site without coming too far up Gordon and without using that intersection, and bring fill, granulars, other major infrastructure that's required for the site servicing into the property at the south end rather than coming in further. But with that said, there will be some access once the stormwater management facility is built, which will be earlier in the phasing of the pre-servicing work. There will be a bit of a disconnection between the south part of the site and the north. So vehicular access will be limited through there. So there will be some direct construction access from 1st Ave as well, and to a lesser extent from 2nd Ave. And that's necessary to make the utility connections. So water and sanitary services will be coming in from 1st and 2nd Ave. There will be some work on the south side of 1st Ave to extend a sidewalk into the development from Gordon Street. And just other general improvements. There's a driveway that encroaches on the site, and the owner's working with that property owner to realign that driveway and so forth. But as I say, the key thing that we were trying to address through this agreement is to make sure that the construction access is to minimize the impact to the existing properties on 1st and 2nd Ave as much as possible. I want to turn to as well the discussion around the existing intersection at Gordon and 1st. There is a condition of approval on this development that says through the subdivision agreement, there will be some requirements to either resolve the current visibility concerns as much as can be done, or if that's not feasible, or even if it is, to look at the condition in terms of the traffic controls with a recommendation for a potential 4-way stop. One of the reasons that's not directly built into the pre-servicing agreement is that we don't know at this time exactly when and what the ultimate condition of Gordon Street will be through this, because that will become more aligned to the south part of the property development, so the 2nd phase. So with this 2nd phase of development, there will be a widening along the west side of Gordon Street. And if this property to the north is also acquired by this development, there's that opportunity, hopefully, to resolve that pinch point on Gordon Street. If all of that can be addressed, in a perfect world, that would allow a sidewalk even to be run down the west side of Gordon Street. So all of those details, need some more work to finalize in order to work them out with the phase 2 development. One of the things that I think is a good idea, or that has been discussed with the owner, is at least temporary 4-way stop at Gordon and 1st Ave. which is consistent with what council discussed tonight. So not to delay that improvement given the concerns, and then that may just need to be redone in a permanent configuration when the other improvements are made. So more details may come on that through the subdivision agreement as well. At this point, as I say, it's just pre-servicing, so not a full subdivision agreement. Ultimately, the access into the development will be via 1st and 2nd Avenue once that new private road is completed. And the traffic study, as I mentioned, did note the potential for a 4-way stop there. So that was anticipated by the traffic engineers who reviewed the current conditions back in the earlier planning stages of this development. Just a quick point that there's a couple of conveyances. I've already mentioned the one about the existing encroachment with the existing residents. However, the town's right-of-way also comes into the site. And so through the subdivision agreement, you'll see there will be some provisions about closing that part of the right-of-way and having the owner acquire that piece from the town. That's not necessary now for pre-servicing, but that will come in the next agreement. And then finally, I just want to round out the discussion by highlighting there's some provisions in the pre-servicing agreement about work required external to the property. So that work includes obviously the improvements on 1st and 2nd Avenue as required, as well as to the west of the site, the outlet for the stormwater pond will be going across the county-owned former rail corridor, and then through private property on John Street, through a new culvert across that property. And then there are some ditch improvements required as well on the west side of John Street. Again, just to make sure that all of that is in good shape to control and receive the outlet runoff from the site. There are some instruments that still need to be approved for that work, and that's all referenced in the pre-servicing agreement, including an easement with the county, an easement with the owner of a 5 John Street property, as well as there's no easement required for the work on John Street, but that's something that will be done within the town's right-of-way, and there's specific provisions about that in the pre-servicing agreement. So at this point, I'll stop sharing the screen, and there are some further details, including a copy of the agreement and the authorizing bylaw in my report. But I won't get into all of those details, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them at this point. Thank you.
Any questions for Steve? Councillor Bernardo?
Steve, the access for construction, I noticed it's, like you said, up by the back alley. Why couldn't they come a little further down and block 8 towards 89 with the construction access? It's really future development block.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, we were just trying to maximize the spacing from Main, so there's room for vehicles to get fully off the highway before they have to turn into the site, and try and give, if there are trucks moving in and out of that point, that anyone using Gordon Street has ample time to react to that movement. However, all of the locations of hauling, or the routes for hauling, are subject to town approval and have to be identified. So of course, we'll make sure that there's no traffic using the rear laneway there. That's been identified with the applicant, that we don't want anyone traveling across that laneway for construction purposes.
The only reason I asked that question is when school time comes around, and if we ever get out of COVID and back to having buses and whatnot going up towards the schools, those trucks, and I'm assuming construction isn't going to start tomorrow, those trucks going in there are going to be interfering with the amount of busing and traffic that goes up Gordon Street to begin with, the construction vehicles, and you've got them on Gordon a fair piece up, and I'm trying to get them off Gordon as much as possible. And that's my thought process. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and through Your Worship, that was considered as well, and we looked at other options such as direct access from Main Street, but it's such a narrow piece of frontage there right next to Gordon that having those traffic movements right beside each other at the intersection was of concern. What we did put in the agreement is to make sure that they've got the signs out that say this is a construction zone, that they've got the flag people out with the temporary stop and slow signs, to manage the traffic and to stop it when there are trucks moving in and out. But the other thing that was considered was just the timing perspective. So if this work can get underway in the near future, say in the next few weeks to month, the goal would be to try and get all of the work that needs that access done before the end of summer, so that by the time the kids are going back to school next September and buses are using the route again, that there's no longer that in and out on Gordon Street.
Any other questions for Steve? No? Okay. Can I get a motion then to receive his report and to enact the authorizing bylaw to enter into the pre-servicing agreement? Moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Donato. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Carried. Okay, thanks, Steve.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a report from our CAO regarding the pilot project for the weekend transits.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. This is just a brief update on the weekend project. Council had approved the redeployment of the $25,000 for bus shelters in January. We've been working with Grey County to look at the launch time for the weekend service. Due to COVID, it's been delayed. We had originally hoped to launch in early May to mid-May of this year. We've also added, in consultation with Grey, because Shelburne is supporting all costs for the weekend pilot project, 2 additional stops. So in addition to the ones that are currently near the arena, as well as at Victoria, we would be adding one at Colonel Phillips Drive and Armstrong Road, so not that far from the new Plaza Tim Hortons location, as well as one at School Road and Simon Street. That would be as close as we're able to get to the No Frills Plaza, and hopefully that will support more intermunicipal use before it moves on to Orangeville. And those mappings and locations are provided in Appendix 1. So right now, if the stay-at-home order is lifted on the 20th of May, we've provided a tentative launch date of Saturday, June 19th for the weekend service, and would obviously adjust that accordingly. The service provider has indicated, like they did last time, they just need reasonable notice to change their scheduling and the timing of their staff and the route. So really, it's a very short report. Nothing else has changed other than that estimated launch date and the 2 additional stops. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Denise? No? Okay. Can I get a motion to receive that report then? Councillor Hall, second by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. All right, next is a report from the treasurer regarding the March 31st financial updates. Carrie.
Thank you, and through the mayor. This is the first quarter report for 2021. And as I was writing it and looking back at my quarterly report last year, we had just started the pandemic, and here we are a year later, in it worse than ever, it would seem at the moment. So the only thing that did change between 2020 and 2021 is our adopted budget. Because we anticipated that COVID would affect 2021, we did budget for our reduced revenues and increased expenses related to COVID. So for budgeting purposes, our estimated to actuals is closer this year than we anticipated that they would be at this time last year. With respect to COVID funding, the town did receive $175,400 in 2020. And as council is aware, we placed 100,000 of that in a reserve to be brought forward in 2021. In January of 2021, the province announced another investment in the Safe Restart Agreement. And for that, we received funding of $35,000 in January. And then again in March, the province announced another financial support through the 2021 COVID-19 recovery funding. And that was based on how many cases of COVID-19 was in your respective health unit during the period of January 1st to February 18th. So Shelburne was eligible for $112,225 with respect to that funding. And we will receive those payments in May and November. Appendix 5 outlines all of the COVID-related costs to date for what we experienced in 2020 and where we are at so far in 2021. When we did the 2021 budget, 2021 budget, we discussed how COVID-19 has affected recreation. And we knew that the CDRC would come forward with a budget that had a lot of COVID-related costs, and they did. So we had estimated a 19% increase to cover any of those costs. So they did come in higher than that. They have identified $150,000 as being costs related to COVID, with Shelburne's share being $93,000. So because we had estimated a higher budget in 2021, we don't need to utilize the full COVID funding of $93,000 because we are collecting from the ratepayers the extra that we hadn't budgeted ourselves. So at this point, to cover the 2021 budget for the CDRC, we would only need to utilize $61,100 out of that $100,000 that we put into the reserve. However, I am anticipating that 2021 is not going to look that great for them again. And they did mention in their budget that if they were not able to be up and running by May 1st, they would have further implications. So we're a week off of that and it's not looking promising. So my suggestion would be that we do save again some money for the 2022 budget with respect to recreation. The other thing that has taken place in the first quarter is the disbandment of the Shelburne Police Services, which occurred February the 18th. When we did the 2021 budget, we had anticipated that there would be a need for short-term borrowing to cover some of the severance contract related costs. And it was reported to council during the in-camera session on April 12th that the total liability ended up only being just over 1.2 million. And we are able to fund that through existing reserves over a 3-year period. So we don't need to take out any short-term borrowing to cover those costs. Attached as Appendix 6 is the OPP's estimated policing costs for 2021, as well as the initial one-time startup costs. So the amount that we put in our 2021 budget versus what their proposal states, the difference is the fact that there was a 2% wage increase for 2021, and their invoicing so far is discounted by 3 full-time equivalent positions. At the time of their letter dated March 12th, which is attached, the OPP remained committed to filling those positions, but until they do, our billing is discounted for those extra positions. They also identified $400,731 in startup costs, which we had anticipated, and it was in our 2021 budget. The only thing that I had not accounted for was that we cannot pull pull from DCs the money to cover the police cruisers because they are not DC eligible. So we do have just over 48,000 in our police cruiser reserve to help offset that cost. And then we are also still working on surplusing the extra vehicles from the Shelburne Police Service, as well as some other surplus equipment that will, once those funds are collected, those will also help to offset the purchase of the OPP cruisers. Mpac Reassessment, we have been notified again that the property tax reassessment that was originally set to roll out for 2021 will be postponed, or sorry, for 2022 will be postponed to 2023. So once again, this means when we, this fall, when we start budgeting for 2022, we will not have any phase-in assessment growth, but we are fortunate enough that we will have a moderate assessment growth just due to our new subdivisions and the new builds that's going on in our town at the moment. Mpac has issued a statement with respect to requests for reconsiderations and applications made under Section 357 of the Municipal Act. And because COVID did not exist in January, on January 1st, 2016, which is the legislated valuation date for assessment, they have advised that they will not be adjusting current property values assessments as a result of COVID-19. With respect to tax and water arrears, we have seen a significant increase in, at the end of 2019, our tax arrears were just over 621,000. And at the end of 2020, they were just over 1 million. So they've almost doubled. I would largely put that due to COVID and financial implications that many people are experiencing. A portion of that increase can also be attributed to water and sewer arrears because there are people that are not able to make those payments. And under normal circumstances, we would try to collect those water arrears through different means, including water shutoff notices. But since the start of COVID, we have not been exercising that right under the bylaw, and we have instead been transferring them to the property tax account. So that kind of skews the property tax arrear amount, you know, it makes it look higher than it maybe normally would be. The other thing that we are not doing is sending any files to the lawyers for tax registration. In a normal year, we would have sent approximately 15 files to the lawyers. If we had have done that this year, we would have been sending 25 files. But instead, we mailed a letter to all the affected property owners, encouraging them to take advantage of our COVID relief plan and to reach out and make payment arrangements with the town. Something to keep in mind is that we still do have to remit our taxes to the county and the school boards, regardless of whether we collect those amounts or not. So it's important to keep our reserves high enough that there's no cash flow issues as far as uncollected property tax dollars. And currently our contingency reserve sits at 744,000. And we do have our tax stabilization reserve on top of that, which we did pull from this in 2021 to help lower the tax rate. With respects to reserve balances, well, you've heard the water and sewer reports from our engineer this evening, and we will be substantially reducing some of our reserves before the end of the year. And we will also be looking into long-term debentures to cover the cost of well 3 and the water tower. And staff are looking into different ways to fund that. And Infrastructure Ontario actually offers a couple of different capital loans and capital lines that are new that they didn't used to offer before. And they allow us to submit a loan application so that we can take on the work, but not debenture until the end of 5 years, or until the project becomes substantially completed, which isn't something that they offered before. So I will be coming to council probably, I was thinking the third quarter, but the way Steve Burnett was talking tonight, it might be the second quarter that I come looking for a borrowing bylaw from Council for Infrastructure Ontario. Appendix 4, I believe, which I skipped over. Yes, Appendix 4 lists all the projects and awards that we have given out in the first quarter. And those included the trackless machine, wayfinding signs, trench box, and flooring on the former Shelburne Police side of the building. And that's about it. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Carrie. Any questions for the treasurer? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Thanks, Carrie, for an excellent report as always. Do you find that providing these options to the residents, payment arrangement options, do you find that that seems to be working in the sense of trying to get some sort of compliance?
Yes, I think it does. We've had quite a few people sign up for our monthly payment plan. So the trick is to not let them get too far into arrears, because of course, the further in you get, the harder it is to get out. So we try to encourage some type of payment, whatever that may be. And we also point them in the direction of some of the provincial aids that's being offered right now with respect to COVID. And so.
Because I wonder, and when you say pointing people to these provincial aids, it sort of begs the question as to whether people are fully aware of what's available to them. And I believe that Councillor Wagner at some point had brought this up in a previous meeting as to the sort of awareness factor of what's actually available, whether it's to businesses or to individuals when it comes in. So I don't know if in, for example, the bills that we send to the residents, that information is included in there.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's included in the COVID relief plan, and it's also included in the letters that went out to the residents that would have normally been registered this year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bernardo.
Just a quick question, Carrie. I know you send out letters, and hopefully they do take part in our payment plans and whatnot that we've offered them. But if there's a case where they ignore and it continues to get further and further into debt, we do have a plan for those residents, or what are we going to do with those particular residents? Because there probably is some that may not utilize any of the support we offer.
Well, under the Municipal Act, the property tax sale changed from 3 years to 2 years. I think you were aware of that?
Yeah.
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 So normally this would have been, the 25 letters that we would have sent out would have been for the people who are 2 years or more in arrears. So by this time next year, those people would have been on our 3-year list.
Yeah.
What the Municipal Act stated for many, many years, until recently changing to the 2-year limit. So I'm not that concerned yet. I would think though, by this time next year, we would have no alternative but to probably send those properties for tax registration. The other thing too is usually, and this isn't a nice feeling for anybody, but usually if they're not paying their property taxes, there's usually other debt as well that's building. And quite often the mortgage company will step in and pay the property tax arrears even before a property reaches registration.
So yeah, that is the hope. But with the issues, I guess, increasing for some residents, and with this COVID and shutdown and whatnot that's going on, it's just putting increased financial pressure on. We still are first to collect on the properties, like if in case of that's what I always believed, that we were first to collect on them.
We're guaranteed, yes.
We're guaranteed, so we don't lose one way or another.
No.
Okay.
Anything else for Carrie? No. Okay. Deputy Mayor Anderson or Councillor Wagner, do either of you know when CDRC might be looking at reevaluating their position? I mean, as Carrie said, that 61,100 that we're likely going to allocate tonight was premised on the fact that kind of regular programming would be up and running as of May 1st. It's probably fair to say that that's certainly not going to happen. So if it hasn't been discussed, I guess maybe if you guys could move that along at that board level, just to make sure that that there's some reevaluation done for that.
Yeah, we actually, I think, Councilor Reagan, we have a meeting, I think, was it tomorrow or Wednesday? I think her screen is frozen, but we have a meeting coming up soon, so we could certainly raise it at that point in time. And I saw that Councilor Reagan was taking notes anyway, so we'll have that addressed.
Okay, perfect. Okay. If there's nothing else, then can I get a motion to receive the report and to allocate the 61,100 from our 2020 COVID Safe Start funding to fund our share of the CDRC budget shortfall? Moved by Councillor Fegan, second by Councillor Hall. All in favor? Carried. All right. Before we move on to the next one, why don't we take 5 minutes and stretch your legs,